the idea of the influence of the arts as something that makes us more human, that allows us to communicate better, that allows us to learn, all of those things is critical.
Welcome to Arts Engines. I am your host, Aaron Dworkin, and today I am so excited that we have with us Bob Lynch, President and CEO of Americans for the Arts. Welcome to Arts Engines, Bob.
It's great to be here. Thanks so much, Aaron, for inviting me.
All right. So I always tell our audience they can kind of, look up our guests online, read all about their bios. We kind of don't want to go through all of that here, but really delve into the meat of kind of all of the work that you do and the impact that you have. One of the things is that, in many ways, I really view you, I think many people view you as America's advocate for the arts. And so can you kind of just share overarching kind of what does that, mean? I know there's a lot of artists I talk and they're like, oh, and I'm like advocacy for the arts, and they don't necessarily know exactly what I'm talking about and why it's important.
Sure. So Americans for the Arts has actually two thrusts, and in fact, we are two different organizations, the result of mergers. So one organization is called Americans for the Arts. It's a 501c3 tax-exempt organization, and we do all of the things like professional development and training and research and advocacy to the extent that the law allows. But we are also the Americans for the Arts Action Fund. Legally, that's a 501c4 organization with a connected PAC, political action. And that organization is the other half of our work, which is advocacy and lobbying, and the 501c4 status allows us to do basically spend all of the time of the several staff people who are in that organization. And so what Americans for the Arts does on those two fronts, the first, our longtime mission, is to be the national organization for all of the local arts agencies, with all of the state arts agencies being members as well. And they are the state and local funding mechanisms for the arts with public money out there across. We train them, we give them the tools that they need in order to do their jobs at the local level in cities all across the country. And that's the core of our work. However, we were founded 60 years ago, and 60 years ago, our mandate was, among other things, to advocate for the creation of the National Endowment for the Arts. So we led that effort, helped create the National Endowment for the Arts, then helped create all the state arts agencies, and we had already been working on the local arts agencies, but there were only a couple of hundred, and today there's 5,000. So the advocacy efforts are federal largely, but also state, working with 50 state arts advocacy organizations, and working to make sure that there's public and private money flowing to the arts in our country. So those are the two thrusts of our work.
Awesome. And so that's an incredible kind of scope and breadth that you have to deal with. On one kind of specifically on the advocacy side, when, in general normal times, people are often like, well, you're advocating for the arts. What about, affordable housing? What about healthcare? What about all of these other things in society that are also needs? How do you kind of balance that argument for the arts? And now, given kind of this current pandemic crisis, how would you, if you will, make that advocacy? How do you share with people how we can better speak about this work that's so important to us?
Sure. Well, first of all, I put advocating for art and culture and the humanities at the top of the list, not at the bottom of the list, at the top of the list for a variety of reasons. One, it is basically the aspect of our country, our society, that brings meaning to the people. What are you working for? What are you trying to survive for? And the idea of the influence of the arts as something that makes us more human, that allows us to communicate better, that allows us to learn, all of those things is critical. And that's just the inherent value of the arts. But what is important to understand are two other things. One, the arts are not a sidebar in our society. Our federal government pegs them as a central $877 billion part of our economy. $877 billion. It's bigger than tourism itself. And that means jobs, bigger than tourism. And that's from our federal government, the Bureau of Economic Analysis out of the Department of Commerce. It means jobs directly. It means economic impact directly. It means economic impact and jobs indirectly, because every arts entity, and you know this so well from your own work, somebody comes to your performance, the audiences are spending additional money on parking and on food, restaurants, or babysitting, or staying overnight. So this economic footprint of the arts is critical, and a really big reason why they go to the top of the list. And then the third thing is what I've been calling it for 40 years, arts and. It's the value of the arts and education and health and healing and homelessness and transportation and every aspect of society. You will look and see artists and arts organizations working hand in hand to help improve whatever the issue is. And we have examples all across the country. Americans for the Arts has a tool called the Social Impact Indicator. It's on our website. And if you go on it, it's a pinwheel, colorful pinwheel, and it has the arts in the center and then all the issues that I just mentioned, some 30 of them. You click on an issue and you see the rich tapestry of things that are happening with arts helping with that particular issue. Data, examples. Some of my own board members, Vijay Gupta out there from your violin work, the first violin LA Philharmonic. Well, he's just stepped down from that after getting a MacArthur. He stepped down from that to devote full time to his real passion, which is work, street symphony it's called, with art, music, and the homeless. And so I put those things together and I say that the arts are a central part of the solution of America's problems, and not to be marginalized, but to be heralded.
Absolutely. And when we think now about artists who are out there, one of the things, there are so many industries that are being hit incredibly hard because of the pandemic and because of stay-at-home orders. And when we think about individual artists, I think a lot of people maybe outside of the arts sphere don't realize that a lot of artists are gig artists or perform in such a way that it cannot be replicated or really done remotely or translate that way, and of course have had massive economic impact. Could you just kind of talk a little about what do you see out there in terms of the impact that the current crisis is causing amongst artists, and what are the biggest things that are being done, and what are you guys able to do?
Well, one of the things that we're doing as we prepare, we just prepared and worked on advocacy for the care package for the crisis, and it has benefits in it for both organizations and individuals. One of the big ones is allowing individuals to be eligible for some of the different kinds of funds that they were not eligible for before, because in fact the individuals are small businesses. They should have access to small business benefits and so on. But in preparing for that, we have two surveys that we're doing right now. One is on organizations and one is on individual artists. And 9,000 individual artists in just the last week that have signed up and given us information on that survey. And what we've discovered is that 97% of them are in dire financial straits because of that, because of the current coronavirus, because the arts are a face-to-face business, and artists in particular, face-to-face selling things. When that's taken away, when people are afraid to buy things for their own enjoyment, then the artists are going to be affected. We have seen Most of them report that they don't have any savings or much savings, so they're not prepared for a period of time without income. We see that a large percentage of them, the majority, have second jobs in the gig economy, and those second jobs are often service industry jobs or things that are less long-term and stable, and those jobs are the ones that are also being eliminated right now. So it's a double hit on all of these artists. One statistic that came out of the study is that the average income of an artist, of these artists at least, they were hoping for something like $42,000 this coming year, and now they're predicting the average is $15,000. So that's a massive hit that artists are taking. And interestingly too, back to the earlier question about the value of the arts, the majority of them, again, big percentage of them, expect to use their artistry and their work to help with the healing process. They want to be part of the solution, not just reacting to the problem, but part of the solution. What better citizens could you ask for? So what can we do? Well, we need to get more dollars to these people. And as we are already looking at the federal package 4 coming up, and I would like to see us find more ways to help individuals in that, and also remembering that getting resources to organizations, arts organizations, that are specifically part of the resource package is to keep people on the payroll. And keeping people on the payroll, artists and staff, is a big goal that we need to work on, because no arts organization exists unless it's paying some artists to do something. So I think that we have to get creative here and work on more avenues of help. There are also loans. There's also other kinds of training programs. There's also looking at big things for the future. A number of people that I'm talking to, we're looking at things that were solutions in past crises, like the WPA, for example, or CETA, Comprehensive Educational Training Act, that put a lot of artists to work, and the WPA in the Roosevelt years put a lot of people to work. Job Corps was created to put people to work, not as many artists at a later time. All of these things we ought to look at as mechanisms for keeping the artistic workforce in our country working, which happens in every other country, but not here.
Wow. So your passion is so clear on these issues, and I'm curious, and I think a lot of our audiences, for you, where does that passion come from? Where does it stem from? How did it start and develop for you, where you've committed your entire life to this role that arts plays in our society?
Sister Mary Andrina, my 8th grade teacher. It's funny, I went to Catholic Grammar School, Stoughton, Massachusetts, and in the 8 years of going to school, I was, every report card I got said, dreamer, attention deficit, doesn't pay attention, things like that, until I got to the 8th grade, and this particular teacher found a passion for writing for me. And so I suddenly I had a, sort of a reputation as the class scribe, the class writer. At the same time, my mother, for many years, and still, she's 96, she's a painter. She was a nurse and then a painter, and the painting passion that she had and still has was another piece of the inspiration. I get to high school, which was a Jesuit high school, and there was no art. There was no theater, no drama. I had 6 years in 4 of Latin, conversational Latin, they called it, but no art. But what I did have was some friends who we got together and we created a rock and roll band. So no training, no classical training, a couple of years of piano lessons, but a passion for that, in the Beatles era. And that passion plus the writing led me to go to college, become a poetry major, and continue. All of that pathway was getting excited about the arts. And then after kicking around for a few years after college, which I think is a good thing for all kids to do, and going to Woodstock and seeing the power of the Woodstock concert, I ended up writing a freelance article about this work 45 years ago. And when I wrote this article for a newspaper, I was freelancing at the time, I said, this is it. This is what I want to do. It's got the art, but it's got the, the business, and it's got the government stuff. It's got every aspect of what I want to see happen to make a better place, the promise of Woodstock, make a better place, be part of that. And that's how I got into it. And then that was 45 years ago, 10 years at the University of Massachusetts, and 35 years now at Americans of the Arts. And it's been on the job learning ever since. And, you just listen in this business to the creative people that we have. And, we learn all the time. I've learned watching you make presentations and change the way I present sometimes. So, it's a constant creative pool that we can bring and harness for our business, for our classrooms, for our whole society. That's exciting.
That's amazing. And we all get to benefit from this passion that you have, because it affects so many of us in the arts in our country. So we're almost out of time, but I had a quick question, which was that I had the wonderful honor to be able to visit your home. And I noticed that there were these fireplace bellows everywhere, certainly more bellows than in any home I have ever been in. And I just was wondering if you could share with our audience kind of where that comes from and where that passion lies.
Sure. Well, the pathway that I took to get here had lots of little parts to it. And on that Volkswagen bus trip, where I was playing guitar at night and learning about the guitar and doing some writing, I also developed a passion for wood and wood carving. And so with a long stint out in Santa Barbara, I got some education in how to be a wood carver. And for about 2 years, before I got into this work, I made a living from a little writing, a little music, and a little wood carving. And the thing I used to love to make was a fireplace bellows. I discovered that making fireplace bellows is the hardest way to make a buck in America. And so I slowly moved into this, kept the passion, and became a collector instead. So I actually have about 100 of them. Only 2 of them here are mine, but I have 100 of them, on the stairwell and in other places. And I'm still passionate for it. And in fact, I've taken up recently, in the coronavirus seclusion, a little wood carving again, hoping to slowly get back into it. And in fact, that's how I keep my creative juices going, because there's a piano here and there's a bunch of guitars. I'm mostly a collector and piler up of guitars as opposed to a good guitar player, but I have a bunch of them. And I take those and the wood, and it helps inspire me and get me going, that I hope leads to some creativity in the work that we're doing, the advocacy work, and so on.
Well, thank you so much. And you are definitely an inspiration to me and to so many of us in the field. And you are definitely one of the great arts engines in our world. Bob Lynch, thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure. And thank you for everything you do. It's really meaningful and important to all of us. Thank you.